Well, with all of those resignations and expectations of more coming in the hours ahead, Boris Johnson has been, as we've been discussing, resisting calls to quit. Some Conservative lawmakers are therefore trying to change party rules, as Sally was telling us, to hold another no-confidence vote sooner than currently allowed, and attention is therefore obviously turning to who might take over if Boris Johnson is ousted. Foreign Secretary Liz Truss is popular with sections of the party. Jeremy Hunt is a former Foreign Secretary who's made it clear that he would be likely to run for leader again, having finished second to Boris Johnson in the 2019 leadership contest. Ben Wallace, the current Defence Secretary, he's become the most popular member of the government with Conservative Party members, partly thanks to his perceived handling of the Ukraine crisis. And Nadhim Zahawi, of course, has just been made Finance Minister and also considered to be a potential front-runner. And we can talk to David Dunn now, who is a political commentator and professor at the University of Birmingham. David, Boris Johnson sounds today like a man who's trying to stay in power, resisting those calls to quit. How, therefore, is this likely to play out? And what mechanisms can Conservative MPs now pull to try and get rid of him, those that want him gone? And PMQs, by the way, is still going on. It's overrun its half-an-hour slot, as it often does. But there are clearly lots of MPs who want to ask Boris Johnson's questions about his future, and many of them are staying in the chamber to hear that resignation speech, which we expect to come a little bit later from Sajid Javid, the Health Secretary, who quit yesterday. These resignation speeches can often be a significant moment, and if Sajid Javid's speech is well received in the chamber, it's the kind of thing that can add to pressure on the Prime Minister, that can lead to the situation becoming fatal for Boris Johnson's premiership. Clearly, with the reshuffle that he has going on, though, Nadhim Zahawi coming into that Chancellor role, Boris Johnson appears to be trying to fight this one out. But it gets harder and harder as those resignations come in. And let's go to the comments now, because we're expecting Sajid Javid now to make that statement.
Despite what it might seem, I am not one of life's quitters. I didn't quit when I was told that boys like me don't do maths. I didn't quit when old school bankers said I didn't have the right school ties. And I didn't quit when people in my community said that I should not marry the love of my life. I care deeply about public service and giving back to this country that has given me so much. That is why, when I got the call from my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, just over a year ago, I didn't hesitate to serve again. It was a critical time for our country. Tough decisions needed to be made about when we were going to come out of lockdown, about supporting the National Health Service and the care sector under unprecedented strain. It has been an absolute privilege of my life to have been trusted with these responsibilities, and I can only hope that my best has been good enough. It has undoubtedly also been one of the toughest roles that I've had so far. The gravity of Home Office decisions, the scale of Treasury decisions, but nothing matters more than the health of your people, of the British people, especially and in the wake of a pandemic. Caring for people's health and well-being is truly a noble vocation. And so I would like to take this opportunity to pay tribute to all of those across the country working in health and care sectors, as well as those that I worked so closely with in my old department, DHSC, and in the NHS. There is so much that I planned for the long term reform of our health and care systems, and it is a wrench to leave that important work behind. Now, when I last gave a personal statement from this seat, I spoke about the importance of institutions and conventions. Today, it is about the importance of integrity. And don't worry, there's not going to be a series of these. Institutions and integrity are both central pillars that underpin our great democracy. It doesn't matter what your political perspective is in this House. I believe that we are all motivated by the national interest and that the public expects us all of us, to maintain honesty and to maintain integrity in whatever we do. This is not an abstract matter. We've seen in great democracies what happens when divisions are entrenched and not bridged. We cannot allow that to happen here. We must bring the country together as one nation. Effective governance inevitably requires loyalty and collective responsibility. Of course it does. And I'm instinctively a team player. And I have completely focused on governing effectively over the last year. But treading the tightrope between loyalty and integrity has become impossible in recent months. And, Mr. Speaker, I will never risk losing my integrity. I also believe a team is as good as its team captain, and that a captain is as good as his or her team. So loyalty must go both ways. The events of recent months have made it increasingly difficult to be in that team. It's not fair on ministerial colleagues to go out every morning defending lines that don't stand up and don't hold up. It's not fair on my parliamentary colleagues who bear the brunt of constituents' dismay in their inboxes and on their doorsteps in recent elections. And it's not fair on Conservative members and voters who rightly expect better standards from the party they supported. When the first stories of parties in Downing Street emerged late last year, I was personally assured at the most senior level by my right honourable friend's then team that, and I quote, there had been no parties in Downing Street and no rules were broken. So I gave the benefit of doubt. And I went on those media rounds to say that I'd had those assurances from the most senior level of the Prime Minister's team. Then we had more stories. We had the Sue Gray report, a new Downing Street team. I continued to give the benefit of the doubt. And now this week again, we have reason to question the truth and integrity of what we've all been told. And at some point, we have to conclude that enough is enough. I believe that point is now. I welcome the Prime Minister's public acknowledgement last night that matters could have been handled better in who he appointed and what was said about what he knew when. And I appreciated his kind and humble words and his humble spirit when I went to see him yesterday, and also the kind letter that he has sent to me. But I do fear that the reset button can only work so many times. There's only so many times you can turn that machine on and off before you realise that something is fundamentally wrong. Last month, I gave the benefit of doubt one last time. But I haven't concluded that the problem starts at the top. That is not going to change. I have concluded that the problem starts at the top, and I believe that is not going to change. And that means that it is for those of us in a position who have responsibility to make that change. I wish my Cabinet colleagues well, and I can see they have decided to remain in the Cabinet. They will have their own reasons. But it is a choice. I know just how difficult that choice is. But let's be clear. Not doing something is an active decision. I am deeply concerned about how the next generation will see the Conservative Party on our current course. Our reputation, after 12 years in government, depends on regaining the public's trust. This is not just a personal matter. The philosophy and perception of Conservatives depends on it. It is central to the Conservative ideal that we believe in decency, in personal responsibility, and in social justice enabled by conventions and the rule of law. The Conservative mission to extend freedom and prosperity and opportunity is all at risk if we cannot uphold that ideal. And, Mr. Speaker, it is not only the Conservative Party is not the only great institution in need of urgent repair. Like everyone in this House, I have been dismayed by the drip of stories of harassment and worse by members of this House. So I'm also concerned about how the next generation will see this House and the health of our democracy. In recent years, trust in our roles has been undermined through a series of scandals. But the one thing we can control is our own values and behaviours. So it is incumbent on all of us to set high standards for ourselves and to take action when they are not met by others. Mr. Speaker, I'm grateful for the messages of support that I've had from many members of this House and beyond. I got into politics to do something, not to be somebody. So it is hard in one way, but not in another. Being a good father, a husband, a son, and a citizen is good enough for me. And if I can continue to contribute to public life and my party from the backbenches, it will be a privilege to do so.
Yeah. Can I say to the House, there will be no more personal statements today.
Bye, Boris.
Let the House leave in peace and quiet.
Well, let's go back to our guest, David Dunn, who's with us now and I think has been listening to Sajid Javid make that statement. In the Commons, Sajid Javid effectively calling on other cabinet ministers to quit like he has done, saying that remaining in cabinet is a choice. He has talked, Sajid Javid, in that statement about being personally assured at the most senior level about things like Partygate, and also talking about ministers being sent out onto the airwaves here in the UK with lines from Downing Street that simply then didn't hold up. So trust and integrity, he says, have been crucial to his decision to quit. David Dunn, as I say, joining me now. David, what did you make of that from Sajid Javid, and do you think it will make a difference to some of those still for now in Cabinet?
I think that statement goes to the heart of the fundamental nature of parliamentary democracy. Prime Ministers only serve with the confidence of their cabinets and ultimately with the confidence of the House of Commons. What we are seeing is a failure of trust, a complete lack of trust now between members of the cabinet and the Prime Minister. They just don't believe him anymore. He has got away with lies, and now actually key members of the cabinet are fed up with the continuing lies, and that lack of trust means that Johnson is now finished. It's a question of time and how, not if, he goes. Parliamentary democracy works on trust, and Boris Johnson has squandered that and abused that trust to such an extent that he is now finished. It's an agonising watch as his final days play out. The days may be months, possibly, but actually he is finished. It's a question just of when.
Well, if you don't mind answering that question, David, what do you think is the most likely scenario here for Boris Johnson's exit, if that is indeed what is coming next?
I think it's likely that it may go to next week that the 1922 committee, which controls the rules on who is the leader of the Conservative Party, that they meet next week with a new set of elections and a new committee. It may go as far as that. They may change the rules. There's two mechanisms. Either the parliamentary party changes the mechanism and they have another vote and they get rid of him and they change the rules in order to do that, which they can do and are quite likely to do, or members of the party, senior backbenchers and other cabinet ministers go to him and say, it's time to go, it's time to leave. That was the mechanism by which Mrs. Thatcher went. The men in grey suits went to her and said, your time is up, it's time to leave, and she left crime from Downing Street back in the early 1990s. Boris Johnson is someone who has no integrity. He actually has no honour, and therefore is unlikely to resign unless he is taken kicking and screaming from office. But those days, I think, are coming. It's possible it could last till the end of the summer. It's much more likely that this now catastrophic attack from within his own government will mean that he will go within the next week.
And David, finally, the Labour Party, the opposition, are calling for an election. They say the country needs a change in government. Is there any prospect of an election soon?
Well, and that's partly why Johnson has been there so long. The fear is that given how unpopular the government, given how many issues the government faces, a lot of Tory MPs have been reluctant to actually put the knife into Johnson and get rid of him, even though they see him as a cancerous sore in their administration. Because they fear that if there was an election to follow this, they would lose seats in large numbers. So that's partly that calculation, as to do we try and hang on to him a bit longer and prolong the life of this parliament? Because there is a tradition that certainly Mrs. May did this, of actually going to the country to try and make themselves have a more legitimate mandate, rather than actually being, they would be prime minister without having been chosen as prime minister by the population. So there is a tendency to want to have to go to the country earlier and get that mandate, and so a general election is a possibility. It has to happen within 2 years. I imagine that the new incumbent will say, now is not a time for an election. But they will be weakened by that because they haven't got the mandate that a directly elected Prime Minister has. But I think actually, while it's a possibility, it's more likely that they will carry on in office until next year rather than before that.
OK, David, thank you. That's David Dunn of the University of Birmingham.